All right, as you guys have probably already seen, level 5, especially in guitar and bass, starts to get significantly harder, and that's certainly one of the reasons it's worth 2 sections instead of 1, right? So double the points. So typically you would do, well, this one's labeled 1 and 2, but a lot of times I'll have people do that basic bass sheet first just because it's a little bit easier, and I can give you some credit for that. This is for the blues bass lines in F, okay? This sheet is definitely a little bit harder. It's probably going to take up most of your time in bass 5. The good news is A, will get easier, and B, I typically will only make you do blues bass lines in F, not also in B flat, okay? For level 6 bass, I'll make you do F and B flat. But this sheet typically takes quite a long time, so I've been kind enough to reduce it to, at least for now, just the 1 sheet, okay? But what I like to do first is go to the bass clef note guide sheet, okay? This is essentially kind of like a cheat sheet that you're going to use for the blues bass lines in F, okay? So I just want to explain it. I'll go through one string to make sure it makes sense, and then I'll play through one of these bass lines at 60 just so you can kind of hear what they're going to sound like, okay? So on this cheat sheet, you want to make sure you're looking at 2 bits of information. It's going to tell you what string and what fret, and then really 3 things, and the note as well, right? Okay? So remember, like the first group of notes are all under the bracket on the 4th string, meaning they're all on my 4th string. That's the lowest string, or the string closest to you, right? The numbers above the notes are what fret. 0 meaning open or 0, right? 1, first fret, 2, and so on, right? And then beneath the note is the letter. That's the actual letter name, E, F, G, whatever your note is, right? So for example, if I start at the beginning, again, I'm looking at bass clef note guide. The first note I see is the E, which is open. My second note says F, and there's a 1 above it. That means first fret. And really important for the sheet, you can do everything in open position, meaning within the first 4 frets. So I should use first fret, first finger, second fret, second finger, third fret, third finger, fourth fret, fourth finger, okay? That's really important because when we speed it up later, if you're using all your fingers like that, it's going to be much easier to go faster. Whereas if you're not, you're going to run into a lot more trouble, okay? Oops. Okay, so we had F as first fret. Then we see F sharp or G flat as the second fret, right? It could be spelled either way. Then third fret is G. And then the 4th fret is either G sharp or A flat. Okay? Now I would recommend at this point, keep going through all of them, just so you kind of understand it. You're obviously not going to memorize all your notes after just seeing them once. So at the beginning of the sheet, you kind of have to go back and forth. You look at your blues bass lines in F, you go, okay, what's that note? Then you look back at your bass clef note guide, you find it, it tells you what string, what fret, and then you play it, okay? So I'm going to kind of go, I'll talk through the first line a little bit, then I'm just going to go ahead and play it. So, if I look at my first line, my first note is at F, you should be looking at where the circle is, right? It's beneath the first line, that's an F. So on my sheet, it says first fret, okay? My next note is the first line, so again, if I look at my cheat sheet, that's a G, which it tells me is 3rd fret, okay? My next note, I could look at my cheat sheet, but if I know this is G, this is just a G sharp, which would be my next 4th fret. Again, I'm trying to use my 4th finger. And then the next note is an A, okay? Which would be on my 3rd string open. So important here, it's not, there's not like each measure isn't just using 1 string. It might be using 1, it might be using 2, it might be using 3. You have to look at all your notes, okay? It doesn't mean that, you know, your measure is going to use 1 string and then the next measure is going to use another string, or it's going to go all over the place, which makes it a little bit harder, okay? So what I'd recommend at the beginning is just go measure 2 at a time to make sure you're doing it right. And typically I'll give you a little leeway. So the first 2 or 3 lines you can do 2 or 3 measures at a time just to make sure you're doing it right. And then once you know how to do it, I'll try and get you to do the whole line at a time, okay? Meaning 6 measures at a time. Not the whole sheet, but we do the whole first line, then we'll look at the whole second line and so on, right? The other thing you should know is whenever you see more than 1 note on top of each other, like your 3rd measure, there's a F and then an F an octave higher. Just do either one, okay? You're not going to play 2 notes at a time very commonly on bass or on the sheet. So actually later on the sheet, you can have up to 3 notes at the same time. Choose any one of the notes and play them, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put my metronome at 60. Again, these should only be at 60 BPM, which is pretty slow. but we're focusing on the reading and using the correct fingering. So here, my metronome is coming up. There it is. Now I put it on at 60. Okay, I'm just going to play the first line all the way through. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so there it is. There's the first line. This is one of those sheets. If you can, I might recommend trying to start it in class when I can work with you one-on-one just to make sure you're doing it right. Once you know what you're doing, there's not a whole lot of tricks or tips to it. You just got to do it over and over again. Again, reading the actual music notes is a language, so it's just going to take time. You'll see even by the end of the sheet, you'll start memorizing some of the notes. It's like you see a lot of Fs, you'll memorize where the F is. You'll see a lot of B flats, you'll memorize where the B flat is. By the second time we do the sheet, it'll start getting easier and easier to eventually where you just see the note and you play with your hands. But anyway, be patient, practice, do your best, and I will see you soon.